I'm going to have a snap election. Will this Corbyn versus Boris Johnson, old Bojo? Is Bojo and Jeremy Corbyn going to run against each other? So I'm going to give you just kind of an overview, just real general, broad strokes about how the snap election works. I just found out. So England, they don't really believe in democracy whatsoever. England, United Kingdom, I guess it's the United Kingdom, right? Because they got Northern Ireland. It would be Great Britain if it was just the island, but the United Kingdom. And then there's the Empire. Anyways, I'll just say England as a synonym for all those things. Okay, so on England's snap elections, they don't directly elect the Prime Minister. They elect all of their MPs. And so I guess that's their that's Parliament, okay? So I guess that's your House of Commons, because you got a House of Lords and a House of Commons. I don't know. But they have, essentially, it's just like America. They got all these districts in their country. Everybody votes in their district for the representative that they like the best. And then they, amongst themselves, vote for the Prime Minister. So the people of England do not vote, directly for the Prime Minister. The Conservatives, they went ahead and chose, their own Prime Minister, but they had a political party in their own party, and there's 160,000 conservatives in a, state with 40-something, 50, 60 million people. So just 160,000, so very tiny. They don't have democracy. Democracy is ruled by the people, and all they have is just less than 1% of the people are part of the Conservative Party. And then in the Parliament, there are some houses there. I saw a picture, and they went ahead and colored all the different sections of the houses. And this is 2 years under Theresa May, but she's the one that called a snap election, 2 years ago. And the makeup of the Parliament at the time was 300 or so conservatives, and then Labour Party had 200, 250 seats. And then you had the Scottish National Party, which had 54 seats, and the Liberal Democrats, which had 9 seats. Now those, small parties, I think in our heart of hearts we're for party nation anyways. The way they can win is if the Labour Party and the Conservative Party are close. But since they're not close, it's basically conservatives run everything in Parliament, and Labour has, 200 seats. They're the biggest opposition party. And so what's going to happen with the snap election? The way the snap election had happened under Theresa May was that she called for it, and then the other MPs approved of the opposition party. So when the Prime Minister, who is now Boris Johnson, old Bojo, when Bojo says, okay, I want an election, he's going to get himself an election. Now, why would a person do that? It seems like if you got power, right, just be a Mitch McConnell, right? You're forced to have an election after 6 years, but in the meantime, just coast. You got the power, right? You're the Grim Reaper. You got to make sure those 9/11 responders don't give any money, don't get any money whatsoever. Make sure they die of, tiny little health care concerns. Anyways, so Mitch McConnell is, a piece of shit, I guess. So both major parties are committed to Brexit. I thought that was pretty interesting. So both the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn leads the Labour Party, Boris Johnson leads the Conservative Party. Before it was David Cameron, and then it was Theresa May, and now it's old Bojo. Okay, so the Conservatives have been running, and then all this is under the auspices, the pretenses of the Queen. So they had their elections, but as soon as Boris Johnson was, elected Prime Minister, then he needs to go kiss Queen Elizabeth's ass. I think he's supposed to kiss her ass and kiss her ring and then bow down to her and lick her shoes. I forget exactly how they do it over there, but they definitely make sure that there's, you're here for the Queen, not the people. You're here for the Queen. So that's, I think, all the American Revolution, that was what King George III said. I hope you don't, lose out because y'all need a dictator. You need sovereign. People need sovereigns. They need one person to rule them all. And so I feel like they're still carrying on with that tradition. What's remarkable, and I'll tell you why why would Boris Johnson, there is a reason. When it comes to England's election, I think it's remarkable actually kind of how they work. It almost seems like their democracy is sort of functioning though. Even though I just insulted them, they, have a sense of, togetherness. So the Parliament rules the country, and so what Parliament decides is what, goes. And so essentially they really respect Parliament. They really respect the body, the legislative body. Whereas we got a Congress and 10% approval rating for Congress. So we don't even give a shit about our representative or Congress. It's all just the president for the United States of America. So I kind of like how they're cohesive, and they seem to, when they make a decision, when they ban guns, guns was banned. When they got universal health care, they got universal health care. So when England makes a decision, it gets enacted. And then they also respect the voter with Brexit. The whole reason that they're all obsessed about Brexit, because they had an election, and Brexit won by, 5-10%. And that's a blowout, right? That was substantial. Brexit barely won, but they won. So you could have another election to, people were real regretful right after Brexit had passed. And so, do the people really want Brexit, right? So they respect the voters so much, though, because it was voted on in an election, and they said, okay, that's the course of action. When the Scottish independence, they had a referendum to become their own country, it was, voted down 48%. So that's, I guess it seems like on some respects, when it comes to their democracy, they're worse at it, and then when other respects, they're better at it. Essentially, it's easier to watch England's politics because they speak the same language as us. So whereas the French and the Germans, who knows what the fuck they're up to? the Greeks, what are the Greeks and the Germans and the French up to? Who the fuck knows? Maybe the interpreter's telling us the truth. But, so I think it's easier to kind of watch this stuff. I also like the Prime Minister questions. And then I also like how they moo at each other. They don't boo, they moo. Moo! This is what they do. So for some reason, the opposition leader and then the leader, the Prime Minister, they square off. And the Prime Minister is, just going on about how the Conservative Party is the way, and we've been doing good, and this is what our program has done, and the other people, they are trying to lie. And then the other people are like, no, the Labour way is the way to do it, and they just go back and forth, and they kind of just really cover a large amount of the country's issues. And so I think it's cathartic for the nation to watch this. It's, fascinating TV. The Prime Minister's questions, they ask really pointed questions. What have you done this and done that? And the Prime Minister has to get up and he has to answer basically to not just the MPs, the Parliament, but to all of Britain, all of Britannica. Great Britannica, United Kingdom, Empire, British, England, Wales. Wales? How did Wales get in there? Wales? You got Wales? The tongue of a blue whale is as big as an elephant? So why would they do it? Okay, so Boris Johnson, it seems to me, if he played Mitch McConnell politics and, we have a non-functioning democracy like here, then he could just ride the wave out. He's Prime Minister. He's the fucking, he's the king, right? He's the most powerful man in England. And most of the time people say that the Queen is a ceremonial position, but she's got her face on money. She's got an empire. So anyways, the Queen's got some power. And if it's just ceremonial, why do we got this? It's, hey, there's a ceremonial. We got a royal family who's not worth a crap of shit. Let's all pay attention and watch them as if they somehow reflect our values. Boris Johnson is, he's not the king, he's the Prime Minister, but that's, he's the man. He's the main head executive. So he is the executive. This is, I think, with the election of the Conservatives, so 160,000, of them were able to vote. So why would a person call for an election? They would do that to get them the mandate of the people. So Theresa May, when she was negotiating with the European Union was like, well, England didn't even like you. She just followed up David Cameron, just like Boris Johnson just followed up. So essentially without, not a general election, just a primary election amongst the Conservatives. So Theresa May, wait, what am I saying here? The reason why Theresa May called for a snap election is because the European Union was sitting there getting on her case, saying she didn't have a mandate for the people, from the people. So by having an election, and the people back Theresa May, and they back the Conservatives, and then they get this large mandate, then they can do whatever the fuck they please. So when people start losing confidence, and that's another thing, there's a vote of no confidence. And that's essentially the standard that I use for American politics. You know, I was holding on to Donald Trump for about 5 or 10%. It all hasn't collapsed, so that's something, right? That's what I said about Obama when he first got in there. It all didn't come crumbling down, so that's, you know, that's something, right? They didn't lose the empire, which it should be a republic. So we should lose the empire and retain the republic, right? That's exactly what we should do. But the snap election, Boris Johnson, there's a reason for him to do it, and there's a reason for him not to do it. The reason why he should not do it is, you know, Mitch McConnell politics. You just, you know, you get power and you just kind of hang on for dear life, right? Nope, not letting go. Nope. Whereas Mitch McConnell's, you know, Boris Johnson's got the power, so he could just ride that power out forever and ever. But the whole thing is European unions are going to say, well, do you really have the support of the people, right? How do we know without an election? And it is a democracy. And they would listen to a democracy. So a Boris Johnson, you know, defeat. If I'm Jeremy Corbyn, I want an election 100%. We don't have any power. We have no power whatsoever. So just to be the opposition party, so you're antagonistic, you know, most of the time. So if I'm Jeremy Corbyn, I definitely want an election. I can't wait for an election. And Boris Johnson talked about defeating Jeremy Corbyn as being one of his planks to, you know, his new regime. So he's definitely, you know, getting ready for this snap election, but it would be Boris Johnson himself that calls for it. Boris Johnson doesn't have to call for the election. Theresa May calls for it, and then the leaders of the opposition party agree to it, then an election happens. So essentially, once their government decides to have an election, they have an election. And then they have, you know, basically the nice cleaning out the gutters sort of party. The reason why Boris Johnson would want an election is to gain that mandate. It was bad politics for Theresa May to call for that election because she did really bad. The British people were not behind Theresa May, and she's a really crappy leader too. She's not very exciting. She's not inspiring, and I'm not, you know, for sure how intelligent she is, but it just seemed like this is who England is listening to. This is from David Cameron to this. So Theresa May is the one that, you know, essentially called for her own, I don't want to say destines, but called for her own end of her, you know, career as a prime minister by calling for the snap elections. So snap elections was really bad for Theresa May. So it could turn out really bad for Boris Johnson. But that's the thing with politics, is that it could go one way or it could go another way. Theresa May wasn't exciting. She wasn't charismatic, and I have no idea what the hell she stood for, to be honest with you. But Boris Johnson, he wants to energize the country, and he wants to make everybody get excited, and he's got this Brexit deal coming. So Boris Johnson would be a contender. If there was an election and he won, if Theresa May had won her snap election, that would have give, you know, the Conservative Party really a big push. Because the people of England said, yes, we put, you know, this person was put in power without our permission, but now that we get a choice, we like what we see, and we're going to go along with it. And so a snap election, that's in Boris Johnson. So it really depends on how the election goes, right? So I see an argument for why Boris Johnson would not want a snap election, but he might lose the confidence of everybody. Oh, I thought you said you was going to, you know, run against Corbyn and defeat him. And so there's a reason for him, you know, not to, but there's also a reason for him to call the snap elections. Basically, I feel like Boris Johnson is a fighter, and he would call for it. If the elections don't happen, then that would be very noticeable, right? Boris Johnson said he was going to defeat Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn wants the election, and the election never happened. So I expect the election to happen. That October 31st is the deadline for Brexit for some reason. But they're apparently going to call for snap elections sometime this year. That's what I was hearing, but it's possible that that does not happen. I think it would be good for them if they did have that, for the ability to influence American politics. You know, will Britain go with the conservative capitalists, or will Britain go with their socialist Bernie Sanders? If Britain went for Brexit at the same time we went for Donald Trump, if they go for Jeremy Corbyn, then that would be a strong signal that a Bernie Sanders presidency is on its way. So English politics doesn't move me, but I think a lot of people in the media, you know, seem to think that it's a big deal. It has some influence, it has some indication, but just because England votes for Boris Johnson isn't Donald Trump, Jeremy Corbyn isn't Bernie Sanders. So there's, you know, it's conservative, liberal, left, right, but as far as, you know, what's their style and what's their substance, they got a lot of differences. I would say Boris Johnson is an intelligent, smart person who is talking about uniting the country. So that means he's actually going to, you know, reach out to labor, and he's not going to just disparage the left. He also defends universal health care. He defends the life of he cares about the life of his own people. Isn't that nuts? We've never had a president that actually cared about the lives of all the people. Universal health care for all Americans. We've never had a president that, even though every industrialized nation in the world, they got universal health care. So Boris Johnson is talking about unity. Boris Johnson is talking about universal health care. He's also very smart and intelligent. Essentially, Boris Johnson is aiming. This is England. They're also very intelligent. They're so fucking smart when it comes to a lot of this shit. Boris Johnson, his goal is to be Trump's brain. So the relationship with America, basically by attaching themselves to America, that's how prime ministers of England have become relevant throughout history. And so that's what they try to do with Tony Blair, David Cameron, they all do it. And so Boris Johnson is angling himself to be the brain of Donald Trump. So when Boris Johnson gets up there and he goes blah, blah, blah about, you know, South Africa and, you know, Botswana and Burkina Faso, and, you know, he talks intelligently, Donald Trump would be like, yeah, that's right. And then by, you know, seeing Boris Johnson on the TV, Trump on the couch, watching Boris Johnson on the TV, he'll, you know, adopt his words of wisdom verbatim if he likes him and he thinks it's smart and intelligent. So Boris Johnson literally is aiming to be Trump's brain. So the distinction between them, I think, is he's fun, energetic, and charismatic, and very intelligent, and he's aiming for unity. Whereas Donald Trump is petty, antagonistic. He's in there to profit himself. He's lied 10,000 times. So he's trying to make as much money as he can for himself. Does he really care about the country? He doesn't care about the Democrats. They represent, you know, half the nation. So he's not trying to reach out. He's not trying to do anything for the Democratic Party or for the people of of the United States of America who voted for these people, who are liberals. So they, you know, have a stake in the whole thing. What I'm saying is Donald Trump hasn't passed universal health care. He hasn't legalized marijuana. He hasn't ended any of these wars. So what has he done for me as, you know, a lefty? Not a goddamn thing. And then that shit with Venezuela just made me lose 100% confidence in him. I had just, you know, 95% confidence. I only had 5% confidence in him to begin with. And then with that whole Venezuela bullshit, okay, so you didn't collapse the country. That might be his biggest legacy. When you go through all these old clips of, you know, Colbert and all those comedians and shit, the stuff we were talking about 2 years, the government was closed down the longest ever in U.S. history. And just think about all the petty squabbles and all the shit that we've been talking about. And this is every fucking day. It's something new, something different, some petty, you know, little squabble, some dumb bullshit that, you know, gets the Twitter sphere all hot and bothered. So I don't know what the fuck you could really say. The judges, he's appointed a shit ton of judges, and so I think that'll probably have a long-term effect. But ultimately, he was a divisive asshole, you know, fucking president. He was always getting into petty squabbles with people, always, you know, while he's taking a shit on the toilet, just tweeting, hey, you stupid dummy head, to, you know, the fucking secretary of the, you know, the deputy secretary of the Department of the Interior. You know what I mean? So, oh, I can't believe you said that. You're fired. You're out of here. So, what the fuck? He totally changed everything. He changed the culture. He changed a lot of shit in, you know, Congress. He wasn't as effective as passing legislation as Obama. Obama passed more major pieces of legislation than any president since Truman. So, both Obama and Trump with getting the wall, that was him being effective. He got the wall, right? He got the wall. So that's, you know, whereas Obama couldn't get Guantanamo Bay shut down, he did get Obamacare passed. So that was big. That was big for the opposition party to take away their, basically their number one big issue. So Trump can claim some victory. He has been getting shitted on by that Russia bullshit, and it's all for nothing. 2-3 years later, what the fuck? All that time that was spent sitting there saying he's a treasonous bastard and this and that, and now where are we at? Now he looks like a fucking superhero because he took all that fight, all them assholes accusing him of being a Russian puppet. Yeah, he likes Putin, but he's not his puppet. He's his own man, and so that's a win for the Republicans too. That they essentially took on an onslaught of shit. But, they dumped an onslaught of shit on Obama, so, it's not without cause. It doesn't have, it's just motivations, or it's, just beginnings. So, yeah, that's how snap elections in England work. It's when the Prime Minister calls it up, ask the opposition leaders if they're for it. If they all agree, their entire parliament agrees, the leaders of the opposition, Labour, and then also the Scottish National, you can ask those, you can include them, make them feel better, make them feel good about things. But I think essentially the opposition leader, once you got 500 people, then, 50 people ain't going to be able to stop it. But you probably could ask the Liberal Democrats and the Scottish National Party too. But I think once Jeremy Corbyn and Boris Johnson agree on an election, that's when an election happens. When Boris Johnson says go, it has to be Boris Johnson. He's the one that's in the Prime Minister's seat, so he has everything to lose. And not really much to gain, but he's got everything to gain too. He's got everything to lose and everything to gain. If he gets the support of the people of Britain, he's going to be Prime Minister for quite some time. If he just hangs on to power without getting the election, then who knows how things will turn out. People will get pissed, will get pissy real quick. So when Boris Johnson says, okay, I want an election, Jeremy Corbyn says, let's do this. That's when a snap election happens. So I hope it happens. I hope it does. I think it'd be interesting. I know I say England doesn't move me, but I'm just doing damage control because in case it doesn't go my way. So I would be interested in a Boris Johnson v. Jeremy Corbyn race. Why? Because, if they vote for Jeremy Corbyn, that's almost a guaranteed signal that Bernie Sanders is going to become president. If Boris Johnson wins, that's not a guarantee that Donald will win, but that is, essentially saying that the wins are, in his favor. So he would get a little bit of motivation for a Boris Johnson win. So there you go. There you have it.